CBSE Board, Class 9, History, Chapter 8, Part 13, audio by Renee Matthew. So in the previous slide, we saw that it was a patriotic duty for all the Indian people to promote Khadi so that they can easily say a bye to the foreign rule. So it was one of the main weapons that was used by the Indians through the form of khadi. The change of dress appealed largely to the upper caste. So naturally, they were very conscious of what they did, and it just appealed to the upper castes and classes rather than to those who had to make do with less and could not afford the new products. So definitely the people belonging to the lower classes weren't happy with the khadi because it was really costly, it was difficult to maintain, and if it gets dirty, there is a procedure through which you have to get it washed and cleaned. So it was not very easy to maintain it and retain it also. After 15 years, many among the upper classes also returned to wearing European dress. So after some time, they really understood that wearing the Western dresses were not only comfortable, but it was very convenient for them to move from one place to another. And they were not at all for wearing the khadi. So these two pictures, the first one, which is given on the right hand side, it is homespun khadi or thread that we used in India. And the picture given at the bottom of the screen shows how the Indians boycotted the British goods. They will either burn it or will not buy it. And all these activities included boycotting of the goods. It was a strong opposition that the Indians really expressed towards the foreign production. Though many people rallied to the cause of nationalism at this time, it was almost impossible to compete with cheap British goods that had flooded the market. Because the goods which came from the UK were really cheap, it was not at all easy for anybody to compete with it. And they had huge machines in large scale. It was like a large scale industry which flourished in the UK. And when you have laborers, when you have manpower, it takes more time to produce goods, right? Because you are very careful, hands are moving on it, hands are working on it, and it takes more time, more number of days, even if you take an order. And that is why it's very costly these days to buy things which is made by hand, which is handmade products. But the machines were so fast, it was produced as a large scale production. It was encouraged in UK. And what happened after that is it was very difficult for India to compete with this cheap goods. The way it was produced in less time, it was produced at a rapid pace also. The speed and the time was a real problem to the Indians. It was not only produced in less time, but also the speed was very high. Despite its limitations, the experiment with Swadeshi gave Mahatma Gandhi important ideas about using cloth as a symbolic weapon against British rule. So it began with the cloth. I told you earlier also that the cloth was a real weapon which they used against the Britishers because that is where they found profit. They came here to trade for spices initially, and then of course they understood that India has got some of the world's biggest textile industry which contributed to the economy of the world, and they wanted to catch that, and that is why they annexed most of the country, most parts of the country, so that they can start their manufacturing part. And then it was a boon for them when the Industrial Revolution came up. They had all the machines, and now it was very easy for them to get all the costly raw materials from India and produce at a very cheap rate in UK and sell it back in India again or all other parts of the world. So Gandhi, through the Swadeshi movement, used cloth as a symbolic weapon against the foreign rule. Mahatma Gandhi's experiments with clothing. So he did a lot of experiment. Like nowadays, we are very familiar with the photo which is given on this particular screen slide. And we may tend to think that it was an idea which just came to his mind on just one day just sprung up in his head. It is not like that. He also did a lot of experiments like the other revolutionists and other reformers, like Tagore also. The most familiar image of Mahatma Gandhi is of him seated, bare chested, and in a short dhoti at the spinning wheel. So it's a very powerful image where he is not even dressed properly, he's only wearing bare clothes, and he is trying to satisfy his need. It was his need, not want. When you say that I want something and I need it, there is a lot of difference. All your wants are not your needs. It was the need of the country to do something against the foreign rule. So he, a great leader, is sitting by the side of the spinning wheel, and he's setting an example to the other people in the country by showing that you can really do this home spinning all by yourself. So he started spinning clothes in his spinning wheel and he started wearing them. So it was a lesson for the people lower strata part of the society also, where he taught the poor people also to do this. Though it was difficult initially, he was setting an example himself. So when his country is under poverty, he also wanted to show that it was his duty to actually do something for them by standing along with them. People can just preach and say, you do that, you do this. But he was literally doing it and showing so that others can just follow the example. He made spinning on the charkha and the daily use of khadi or coarse cloth made from homespun yarn. Very powerful symbols. So all these things are very powerful. The image itself tells you there is the use of khadi, and it is a coarse cloth which is made from homespun yarn. The yarn is also there next to him. And these are all powerful symbols. Why it is powerful? Because he's trying to show that you can satisfy your own need by being an immediate help for yourself. You have to help yourself, especially at this crisis, in this crisis period. These were not only symbols of self-reliance but also of resistance to the use of British mill-made cloth. Look at those two words. Self-reliance is you are relying on yourself. You are not dependent on anybody else, but you are just dependent on yourself to fulfill your need. And also, the other word is resistance. You are not at all encouraging the manufacture of the foreign cloth. You are resisting it, you're detesting it, you're even opposing it. Mahatma Gandhi's experiments with clothing sum up the changing attitude to dress in the Indian subcontinent. So, when you have a good leader who is very strong, who doesn't fight publicly but has all these powerful signs and symbols of protesting in a very silent way, the Britishers also were a bit awkward at this. They also were weakening at this because it was a very silent revolt. Instead of just completely going for large scale protest, he did this, he taught the people to do it also. Now let's take a flashback, a quick flashback into Gandhi's life, a very short one. You can see the picture on the right hand side. Look at his progress in life as a small boy, then as an adolescent, then he becomes our Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, so as a boy from a Gujarati Banya family, he usually wore a shirt. So why is this particular part involved in this chapter? Because we saw that people just participated in the revolution and the national dress was a gradual revolution. There was a lot of change. It is not that one day Mahatma Gandhi decided to wear khadi clothes or dress like how we see him here in this picture without less clothes and all that. No, it is not like that. Initially, he wore a shirt with a dhoti or pajama and sometimes a coat. So this was his dress when he was a boy. When he went to London to study law as a boy of 19 in 1888, he cut off the tuft on his head. It was a part of his culture, his custom and identity. He cut it off and dressed in a Western suit so that he would not be laughed at. So, with the tuft of hair on the head, people were very rational, and people were towards this racialism in the Western parts of the globe. So, he didn't want to be mocked by anybody, and he was a teenager also. So, he just did away with his custom. He cut his hair, and also he started wearing the Western suit so that he looked like one of them at least, and tried to show them that he was trying to dress like them, something like that. On his return, he continued to wear Western suits topped with a turban. So, just like some of the other people in India who said, okay, you can wear Western clothes, it was like a fusion where you wore the turban. So, this is how he dressed initially once he came back from London after his law studies. As a lawyer in Johannesburg, South Africa in the 1890s, he still wore Western clothes. So, actually, a great part of his life, like especially in his young age, he spent most of his time in South Africa immediately after his studies. So that is something which taught him. That is something which moved Mahatma Gandhi to really work for the poor and the downtrodden. It influenced him a lot. If you read the autobiography of Gandhi, it is mentioned that that is the time he realized that there is a part of the world which is really crying in need. So, in South Africa in the 1890s, he still wore Western clothes. So it is not that from a very early age he was dressed in these kind of khadi clothes, bare chested, and all that. It is because of the need of the place and need of the hour that made him change.